There is a very specific kind of person personal finance advice does a terrible job of talking to. They are not obviously broke. They are not drowning in chaos. They are not the person eating instant noodles in the dark while dodging debt collectors and pretending the phone is on silent for mental health. But they are not wealthy either. They make decent money, sometimes even good money. Their bills get paid. Their rent or mortgage clears. They can go out sometimes without checking whether one dinner just destroyed the rest of the week. They look normal, stable, functional, maybe even successful from the outside. And yet, when they look at their actual financial life, the numbers are weirdly unimpressive. The income is real. The progress is not. That gap is one of the strangest and most expensive places you can live financially, because it creates the illusion that everything is basically fine while quietly preventing anything meaningful from compounding. I am talking about the almost rich trap. It is the place where your income is high enough to support a more expensive lifestyle, but not high enough to make your mistakes harmless. It is where you can afford more, so you do, but somehow still cannot build the kind of financial position that would actually change your life. It is where you stop feeling urgent enough to be careful, but you are not yet strong enough to be free. And that middle zone can eat years. Nick here, and today I want to talk about why decent money is often more dangerous than people realize. How "I'm doing okay" can become one of the most expensive stories people tell themselves, and why some of the people who look the most comfortable financially are actually just living inside a higher budget version of stagnation. Why this income zone is so deceptive. If you are truly broke, the problem announces itself. You feel it. The stress is obvious. The urgency is obvious. The lack of room is obvious. That does not make it easy, but it does make it visible. If you are genuinely wealthy, the benefits start becoming obvious too. You have margin. You have options. Your money starts doing work without needing your full emotional participation every single month. The dangerous zone is the one in between. You are making enough that your life no longer feels like a daily emergency, but not enough that bad habits, inflated fixed costs, weak saving patterns, or mediocre investing choices can be absorbed without consequences. That is the trap, because the emotional pressure drops before the math really improves. You stop feeling broke long before you stop being financially fragile. And once the emotional pressure drops, people relax in ways that sound harmless at first. They get the nicer apartment because they can technically afford it. They upgrade the car because they are tired of feeling behind. They start eating, traveling, subscribing, financing, and socializing at a level that fits the identity of someone who makes decent money now. Nothing feels crazy. That is what makes it so effective. The almost rich trap is not built out of spectacularly stupid decisions. It is built out of completely reasonable upgrades that become a system. The income level where people start lying to themselves. Let's put numbers on it. Imagine someone making $95,000 a year. Depending on taxes and where they live, maybe they are bringing home roughly $5,800 to $6,200 a month. That is real money. It is enough to feel like you should be doing pretty well. And in a lot of ways, you are doing better than most people. But now watch what happens. Rent for the nicer place, $2,100. Car payment for something newer, $650. Insurance, $220. Phone and internet, $170. Utilities, $250. Groceries, $700. Gym, subscriptions, random monthly memberships, $180. Student loans, $350. Gas, parking, transportation, $300. Dining out, social life, convenience spending, $700. Travel sinking fund, gifts, and everything else that makes life feel normal, $500. That total gets you to around $6,120. And what is fascinating is that none of those numbers are particularly absurd by themselves. That is the whole issue. The life is expensive enough to consume the income, but normal enough to avoid setting off internal alarms. You are not living extravagantly. You are just living at the full emotional speed of your paycheck. And once that happens, income stops translating into security. It just translates into upgraded normal. Why doing okay can be financially dangerous. This is one of the least appreciated problems in personal finance. A lot of people think danger looks like collapse. They think the risky financial life is the one with obvious dysfunction. Sometimes it is. But another version of danger is much quieter. It is the person who earns enough to maintain momentum without ever creating leverage. They can always patch things. They can handle the month. They can absorb the dinner, the trip, the annual bill, the financed upgrade, the random leak in the budget. Nothing is catastrophic, but nothing is compounding either. They are surviving at a nicer altitude. This is why decent income stagnation can last so long. The person feels just comfortable enough to postpone serious change. They tell themselves, I'm not behind, I'm just building gradually. I'm not undersaving, I just have a lot going on right now. I'm not carrying too much lifestyle, I'm just finally enjoying my life. I'm not financially weak, I just haven't prioritized investing yet. That last word matters. Yet, it is one of the favorite words in the almost rich trap because it makes delay feel temporary, even when the pattern has been running for years. The real difference between income and traction. One of the cleanest ways to understand this whole problem is to separate income from traction. Income is what comes in. Traction is what stays, grows, and makes future life easier. A lot of people dramatically overestimate how much traction their income is actually creating. They assume that because they make more than they used to, the system must be improving. But income alone does not guarantee better financial position. It only creates the possibility of it. If every raise turns into higher rent, nicer habits, bigger defaults, and more expensive normal, the traction stays weak even while the salary number climbs. This is how someone can move from $60,000 to $95,000 and still feel weirdly unstable. The identity improved faster than the structure did. They started living like the person with the bigger paycheck before they built what the bigger paycheck was supposed to build. And that mismatch is expensive. How decent money weakens urgency without creating real strength. There is a strange psychological shift that happens once people cross into, I'm not struggling like I used to territory. The little pain signals get quieter. You stop obsessing over every grocery decision. You stop feeling the same pressure around each restaurant bill. You stop getting that sharp, immediate reminder that money is finite every time you spend it. That sounds positive, and sometimes it is. But it can also create a false sense of financial maturity. You start behaving like someone who is stronger than your balance sheet actually says you are. You finance more because the monthly payment fits. You travel more because you need to enjoy life too. You keep more expensive routines because you finally can. You save less aggressively because it no longer feels urgent. You postpone hard financial cleanup because you are no longer scared enough to do it right now. And just like that, the emotional discomfort that might have forced a stronger system never arrives. The pressure disappeared before the strategy improved. That is why so many people plateau financially in the decent income zone. They lost the fear that pushes action, but they have not yet built the assets that create real ease. The trap of deserving the upgrade. A lot of the money that disappears in this zone disappears under one very powerful emotional story. I earned this. That story is not wrong. It is just incomplete. Of course you earned the nicer meal. Of course you earned the better neighborhood. Of course you earned the trip, the furniture, the upgraded habits, the version of life that looks less like you are still trying to recover from your 20s. The question is not whether you earned it. The question is what you gave up to have it now instead of later. That is the part people do not calculate. Because the almost rich trap is not really driven by greed. It is driven by timing. People take the reward before they build the base. They enjoy the income upgrade before they convert enough of it into assets, margin, and resilience. So the lifestyle gets there first, and the financial strength shows up late, if it shows up at all. That sequence feels natural, but it is backwards. The trap of deserving the upgrade. A lot of the money that disappears in this zone disappears under one very powerful emotional story. I earned this. That story is not wrong. It is just incomplete. Of course you earned the nicer meal. Of course you earned the better neighborhood. Of course you earned the trip, the furniture, the upgraded habits, the version of life that looks less like you are still trying to recover from your 20s. The question is not whether you earned it. The question is what you gave up to have it now instead of later. That is the part people do not calculate. Because the almost rich trap is not really driven by greed. It is driven by timing. People take the reward before they build the base. They enjoy the income upgrade before they convert enough of it into assets, margin, and resilience. So the lifestyle gets there first, and the financial strength shows up late, if it shows up at all. That sequence feels natural, but it is backwards. A comparison that explains almost everything. Picture two people earning $100,000. Same city, same tax situation, same general level of intelligence. Both of them are working hard. Neither one is living like a cartoon villain with a boat payment and a closet full of poor decisions. Person A treats the bigger income as permission. Nicer apartment, newer car, more convenience, more travel, more I deserve this. Their life looks elevated almost immediately. On the outside, they appear to be winning. Person B treats the bigger income as a gap-building opportunity. They let some lifestyle improve, but not all at once. They keep fixed costs relatively sane. They build cash. They kill ugly debt. They invest heavily. They delay some visible upgrades because they want invisible strength first. 3 years later, the lives look similar on social media. 10 years later, they do not. Person A has maintained the image of progress. Person B built the infrastructure of it. That difference compounds into everything. One person can survive a layoff, negotiate harder, invest through bad markets, say no to nonsense, and absorb a bad month without needing a spiritual crisis and a balance transfer. The other person still needs the paycheck to arrive on time every 2 weeks, even though the salary sounds impressive in conversation. That is what the almost rich trap does. It lets your income grow faster than your actual power. Why this happens more than people admit. There are a few reasons this trap is so common. The first is social calibration. Once you enter a higher income bracket, even a modestly higher one, the people around you begin normalizing more expensive behavior. Better restaurants, better vacations, better housing, better defaults, a more polished version of adulthood. And because you can participate, at least technically, the lifestyle starts feeling appropriate. The second is emotional repair. A lot of people spend their first decent years of income trying to emotionally repair the years before. They are tired of feeling behind, tired of saying no, tired of the cheap version of everything. So they overshoot into consumption, not because they are shallow, but because comfort finally feels available. The third is the lack of drama. Nothing breaks immediately. The person can keep up. They are not missing rent. They are not maxing out cards every month. So there is no obvious point where the system screams, "This is failing." It just quietly fails to get stronger. That kind of failure is much easier to live with than obvious crisis, which is exactly why it can last for a decade. The really expensive part, what decent income could have done. This is where the opportunity cost gets painful. Let's say someone earns enough to save or invest an extra $1,500 a month for 10 years. But instead that money gets quietly absorbed by better housing, more expensive defaults, mild lifestyle creep, and generally living at the edge of a new income level. $1,500 a month invested at 8% over 10 years becomes around $274,000. That is not a cute little difference. That is a serious piece of financial life. That is the kind of money that changes how you think, how you recover, how you negotiate, how much nonsense you have to tolerate, and how close you are to the point where work stops feeling like the sole structural support beam of your existence. Instead, a lot of people use that exact same income capacity to fund a version of life that looks more complete but remains surprisingly fragile. And again, the point is not that they bought crazy things. The point is that the invisible assets did not get built. What fragility looks like at a higher income. People imagine fragility as a low-income problem. It is not. High-income fragility exists. Mid-income fragility exists. Decent income fragility is everywhere. It looks like this. You make good money, but a layoff would still be terrifying because the fixed costs are too high. You make good money, but the emergency fund is underwhelming because every extra dollar has a job already. You make good money, but your investments are weak because you have been meaning to get more serious. You make good money, but your life still cannot take much impact without entering recovery mode. You make good money, but you need the whole machine to keep functioning exactly as it is. That is not wealth. That is a more expensive dependency model. And a lot of people confuse the two because the paycheck is nice and the visible lifestyle looks upgraded. The weird emotional cost of this trap. The almost rich trap does not just hurt financially. It creates a strange emotional friction too. Because when someone is clearly struggling, they usually know it. When someone is clearly strong, they feel it too. But this middle zone creates confusion. The person thinks, why do I still feel stressed? Why do I make decent money and still not feel ahead? Why does every raise disappear? Why do I keep expecting my finances to feel more solid than they actually do? That confusion matters because it often leads people to chase the wrong solution. They think the answer is simply more income. And yes, sometimes more income helps. But if the structure stays the same, more income can just produce a nicer version of the same trap. That is why some people earn more and more over time without ever creating proportionate peace. They are not converting income into traction. They are converting it into upgraded consumption and calling the whole arrangement success because nobody visibly panics. How to know if you are in it? Here are a few clues. If your income is objectively decent, but your liquid savings are weirdly unimpressive, that is a clue. If your raises disappear so fast you barely feel them, that is a clue. If your life looks fine but would be hard to sustain through even 1 or 2 bad months, that is a clue. If your fixed expenses grew faster than your assets, that is a clue. If you have spent the last few years becoming more comfortable without becoming much more powerful, that is a clue. If you have a strong-looking life with weak underlying margin, that is the clue. This is not about guilt. It is about diagnosis. Because you cannot fix a trap you keep mistaking for normal. What breaks the pattern? The way out is not to become joyless or weirdly aggressive. You do not need to live like a monk just because your paycheck got healthier. You do need to reverse the sequence. Invisible strength first. Visible upgrade second. That means if income rises, the first new jobs for that money should be emergency savings, debt cleanup, investment automation, lower fragility, more margin. Not because life is not for living, but because life gets much more enjoyable once your baseline is not secretly precarious. It also means being suspicious of any lifestyle change that permanently raises your monthly cost structure before it raises your resilience. That sentence matters. A lot of things feel affordable in monthly payment terms and disastrous in strategic terms. Another useful move is to set an identity rule. Instead of thinking, I make more now, so I can afford this, try asking, would someone who is actually getting stronger financially make this move right now? That question filters a lot of nonsense. The version of rich people misunderstand. A lot of people are trying to look financially healed before they are financially strong. That is what creates the almost rich trap. They want the apartment that says they made it, the routine that says they are no longer struggling, the lifestyle that says they are doing well now. But appearance and strength are not the same category. You can look recovered long before you are secure. You can sound successful long before your numbers say anything meaningful. And if you are not careful, the effort to feel rich becomes the exact thing that delays actually becoming strong. That is one of the most expensive ironies in adult life. The closing thought that matters. There is nothing wrong with making decent money. Obviously, the danger is what happens when decent money creates emotional permission faster than it creates actual financial muscle. That is the almost rich trap. You stop feeling urgency. You start living up to the paycheck. Your standards rise. Your costs rise. Your visible life improves. Your invisible strength lags. And years later, you realize you did not build wealth. You built a more convincing costume for financial stability. The solution is not to fear better income. The solution is to respect how dangerous this middle zone can be if you let lifestyle get to your money before structure does. Because the goal is not just to earn enough to look fine. The goal is to become hard to knock over. And those are two very different financial lives.